There's about a month left until President-elect Yoon Seok-yeol takes office. And leading up to that very May 10th inauguration, there will be continued efforts to iron out the details of the incoming administration's policies. Today particularly, we want to focus on bilateral alliances and coordinating policies with namely the U.S. and China, as its fate will largely determine the political and economic future of the country. For some insight, we connect with Professor Kim Byung-Joo of the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Good morning, Professor Kim.
Good morning.
Let's begin with President-elect Yoon Seok-yeol's delegation visit to Washington last week, led by Park Jin. What are seen as some key achievements by the delegation?
The main purpose of this delegation is to, get in motion in terms of coordinating and cooperating with the United States government, particularly because the incoming Yoon government's key idea for its foreign policy, diplomacy, and national security policy is further strengthening its ties with the United States. So, therefore, this was the first step in many ways. And so they sent this delegation, and they met with the top leadership in the issue area of national security and diplomacy at the White House. National Security Council, for instance, its leader, Jake Sullivan, and the one who's in charge of East Asian affairs, Kurt Campbell, at the White House. And also they met with top officials at the State Department, such as Wendy Sherman. As far as I know, I think that it was reported that they met with the head of Defense Department, Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, as well, even though I don't have much information about that particular meeting. And altogether, they also met with the congressional leadership, especially in the issue area of diplomacy, the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the Senate, and then head of the Foreign Affairs Committee of the House of Representatives as well. So the overall basically kind of a showcase or getting to know each other for the side of the Yoon government with the Washington counterparts as the new government is being launched in a few weeks' time here. So it was their overall mission. And going beyond national security and diplomacy, they also had a meeting with the issue leaders such as Ambassador John Kerry, who is the head of climate change negotiation of the United States. And they also sat down together with the government leadership on the side of industry issues, trade issues, and the global supply chain issues overall. So, as I said, this was a kind of like a first step in terms of opening the channel between the incoming Yoon government on this side and then the Biden government on the other side of the Pacific, I suppose.
All right, so laying out the groundwork, it's just the first of perhaps many sit-downs that will happen. I do believe following the Ukraine situation, the incoming administration is in a tough spot as the incoming government will have to show to the Korean people that it is defending the country better through strengthened Korea-U.S. ties. For this, what do you see in the delegates' trip this time around?
Right. The idea behind that is what's called extended deterrence. This is a very, like a professionally used term. The public may have trouble understanding what it means. Extended deterrence means that the United States is going to defend South Korea as if it is a part of the United States territory, basically. Right. And that's a strong commitment in a way. And so this delegation had strengthening that idea and further reassuring of the commitment as a whole. But in return, of course, there were demands being made from Washington's side in return, for example, asking Korea to join the Indo-Pacific Economic, the partnership and then, the framework ideas as a important member, and then asking Korea to join and strengthen its commitment to the trilateral cooperation between Seoul, Tokyo, and Washington as well. Also, there was a demand to join strengthen its commitment to Quad. Of course, Korea has already committed that it's joining Quad as a working group member, but there may be further expectation for that. And then also this time, important one is with regard to North Korea, CBID, the complete denuclearization and complete, irreversible, and verifiable denuclearization that used to be used before Trump's time has been brought back as a more ambitious goal for denuclearization. So those things were being discussed, give and take between Washington and Seoul this time.
Professor Kim, the delegation to Washington, D.C. this time around included some of Yoon Seok-yeol's cabinet candidates. What difference do you think this lineup of the delegation made during the trip?
Yeah. Yesterday, I don't think announcement itself was made for Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs, but the head of this delegation is widely talked about being possibly the head of future head of Minister of Foreign Affairs as well. We'll have to wait and see on that one. The deputy head is being talked about, possible candidate to lead the national intelligence and so on. What's interesting in the delegation, the competition of it is, together with those important figures from the political circle, they also included from academia, expert on China affairs, and then a separate expert on Japan affairs. Also, together with the former general who served as the military attaché in Washington, so that's specifically military affairs, and then also some senior researchers from national think tank who has been studying global supply chain issues altogether. So diplomacy, foreign policy, military cooperation, and then China relationship with China, Japan, and then issue expert on global supply chain. They were all put together. This was a very interesting composition of a delegation, we have to say.
Relating particularly to the issue of Korea-U.S. ties, the U.S. ambassador nominee to Korea expressed hardline stance toward North Korea just last week. What does this development add to the newly emerging security environment in the Korean Peninsula?
Philip Goldberg, he is the one who's nominated, and he was going through the Senate confirmation hearing last week. And this, together with the Korean incoming Yoon government delegation to Washington, in two venues, they were talking about CVID as the goal for North Korea nuclear policy towards North Korea, denuclearization, how it should be done, and what should be achieved. And Goldberg, Ambassador Goldberg, was very firm about bringing back the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization, CVID, as the goal of North Korean policy here. So that cuts a lot of attention and media coverage here in Korea. And he was bold enough to call North Korea a rogue regime. And altogether, he made sure that Washington and Seoul needs to work close together, to achieve this ambitious goal. And then he was making it very clear that Biden administration and a representative of Biden government here in Seoul, himself, want to push ahead with clear and clearly defined policy goals towards North Korea. So it was very interesting hearing that we were noticing last week.
All right. Speaking of another tough issue at hand for South Korea, we have to add China to the picture. The Chinese ambassador to Korea issued his words on THAAD last week. He considers it taboo in the Korea-China relations. What do you make of this, Professor Kim?
Yeah, it was interesting. I have my own, the personal feeling towards Ambassador Shin Hai-ming, Chinese ambassador in Korea, is quite mixed. If anyone, he could be a best qualified ambassador from Beijing that could touch the heart of Korean public. He speaks wonderful Korean. Some people claim that he speaks better Korean than many other native Koreans, in fact. And he really understands this country. And at the beginning of his tenure, he made it very clear that generating goodwill between the two countries is a key mission. But since then, I think things have changed a lot in terms of what has been happening inside China, and that has brought some reactions from outside looking at it. One of the example is what's happening in Shanghai right now with regard to COVID and so on. And Korean people have mixed feeling about it. And we continue to have this cultural conflict issues between the publics in both countries. So So, Ambassador Shin Hai-ming is put in a very difficult position, I have to say, and representing the voice of Beijing. And he did exactly that last week. He said, as you mentioned, THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Anti-Missile Defense System, that Korea brought in from the United States has become a taboo word, and both countries have to make sure that the same mistake should not be repeated. And so that was a very strong word, and it was not really him that we knew at the beginning was his career, but he was more serving his kind of official duty altogether. Right. And he was adding last week, he said, one of the key reasons why we are getting into this trouble with North Korea is North Korea's security concerns are not being addressed. And so blaming this side for the troubles rather than accusing North Korea of any wrongdoings on that side. So that was also slightly disappointing altogether. But he was, mentioning the need for the mutual respect between Beijing and Seoul, and then cooperation on a fair basis and so on. And I guess the last point is something that we, all of us here in Korea, want. We want to be on an equal, respectful footing towards each other, rather than one side pushing the other one, saying, I think these words have been issued by Chinese officials in the past. Smaller countries have to listen to big countries. They said that with regard to Korea. And those kind of things really hurt, the relationship. So, setting aside some of those points that Korean public did not exactly like, but the last point that, Ambassador Shin Hai-ming pointed out, is something that both sides should really keep in mind and try to promote all together. I mean, by the way, we do know that the favorite word for Chinese diplomacy experts is sovereignty. Sovereignty, respecting sovereignty is not, no intervention into domestic affairs. And if China does anything to be viewed that way, such as THAAD issue is, of course it's an issue that affects them, but it's a domestic issue for Koreans for national defense. And if they continue to take steps towards that, it's not going to work really well with the Korean public. So I think those points should be made very clear on both sides.
All right. Professor Kim, lastly, before we let you go, going back to that Korea-U.S. ties we began this discussion on, many seem to believe that the Ukraine invasion offers significant lessons for Seoul-Washington ties. For example, I do think war could serve as a reminder of maybe important values and norms in international politics. So what kind of lessons are we talking about in this context?
Right. Exactly as you mentioned, international norms. These days, increasing number of experts in foreign relations here in Korea saying Koreans' diplomacy should be based on values and norms. And, as we look into Ukraine, so that's one of the realization. So far, before Ukraine, a lot of experts were saying, our diplomacy has to be based on our realist national interest. But now the attention is being turned to value and norms and standards and so on. That way, we can secure greater respect from other countries. We hear such increasing voice. Clearly, that's one of the lessons we draw. And then the other one is, as Ukraine situation was being unfolding, many of the national security experts were really quick to point out that alliance is really important in international relations. You gotta be a part of strong alliance where other countries will be willing to come and help you. In Ukraine's case, Ukraine people, the majority of the people, not entire population, but majority of people wanted to join NATO as reliable alliance, but it didn't work out on time. And before they did so, Russia joined. So alliance is very important. And together with that, however, of course, based on realization, we send delegations to Washington and everything. So alliance with the United States is a critical, immediate, and then mid-range in terms of time horizon. But more fundamentally, I think what we are realizing is that in the longer term, self-defense. Self-defense is really important. Capability to defend ourselves is very important. And that's something we cannot lose our sight of. And we are being mindful about the possibility that after Biden administration, because the United States is divided, possibly Trump or someone like Trump may come back and may say something different from defending Korea like Trump did last time. Trump was a very mercenary style, Korea has to pay and all that kind of stuff. So that we have to be prepared as well. So for that, in the longer term, self-defense is really important.
Because South Korea has continued to rely on alliance for security, does that dependence change depending on, who might be next in line in the U.S. presidency as well? A lot clearly stands in the balance, but thank you very much, Professor Kim, for providing all the insights this morning. We'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.